welcome everyone to our virtual breakfast event this morning. I believe some of you will probably have a breakfast hamper in front of you as well, so I hope you're enjoying those too, for those that have them. And before I introduce our speakers, I thought I'll start by just introducing UNRVLD, because you may or may not know of us. So I'm going to start there. So we're UNRVLD, we're a digital agency, and we work with ambitious brands who want to be unrivaled in their sector, who want to lead in their sector and grow at scale. And to help achieve that, we specialise in services around digital experience and marketing technology. And we find that we have the most impact and we drive the most value when we work with clients as a long-term strategic partnership, which is exactly how we've been working with some of our clients in the higher education sector. So we've been working with and consulting for clients in this sector for over 10 years now. And in that time, we've helped many of these organisations realise their digital vision by implementing sophisticated strategies that are focused on delivering against core business goals. And I'm pleased to say that our work has picked up some awards along the way. So our experience in your sector means that we've got a really deep understanding of some of your challenges, your pain points, the seasonality, especially when it comes to student recruitment, and the objectives that you're trying to hit. And some of those our speakers will cover off today. And to help address those, we offer a set of tailored services for this sector that we've sort of defined over the years. So I'll just pick up on a couple of these. It might be that some clients are at the start of a digital transformation journey and they need our help around consultancy and strategy to set the foundations for that initiative. And Tom will come on to that in a little bit. And then that might lead into a platform implementation project where we can look at an end-to-end design and build, like we've done for the University of Essex, for example, which is what you can see on screen here. It might be that some clients are thinking about their technology roadmap. What do we need to be thinking about and considering potentially moving on to? So we can advise around things like technology evaluation and validation. We specialise in a number of technology platforms, Sitecore being one of them, but we can also work with, in a more composable route, with Mac services and an API-led approach. So whatever platform you might be on, we can still look at supporting you. And then some slightly smaller engagements, because we work with clients in different ways. For example, for the University of Hull, we deliver iterative UX and design sprints, so purely focused on the design element that we hand across, and then their development teams implement that. And also services around the all-important student recruitment and lead generation and clearing campaigns. We do a lot of that work with Leeds Beckett University, which Polly will come on to a little bit later. So some of those are quite chunky pieces of work and chunky services. Some of them are sort of smaller engagements. If any or some of these are of interest to you, depending on where you're at now with your digital, if you want to chat about anything on this list, more than happy to chat. Feel free to reach out. In fact, I think we've put my details on screen. My email address is there. Feel free to drop me a note. Happy to chat further. We can maybe set up a time for a coffee. So that's enough about us. I'll just introduce you to our speakers now. So on the call with us today, we've got Tom, who's our Managing Director, and Polly, who's our Experience Optimization Director. So we're going to ask Tom to run through his keynote first. There'll be a couple of polls through this as well, and then you'll hear from me again as we hand across to Polly.
Thanks, Amy. Hi, everybody. Morning. So in terms of, what we're going to cover today. So as the title suggests, we're going to kick off with a bit around building a business case. And as Amy alluded to there, some of the programs we've been involved in over the years have been sizable programs, and they've needed a good solid business case to get started. So over that period of time, we've developed a framework, which we think will be hopefully of some value today for anyone who's starting on that journey or is potentially at the beginning or midway through a program like that and needs some support in how to canvass opinion and how to build a good consensus of support for the program within the organization. So we're going to start with that, and then we're going to move into more of probably something that's right on the cusp of everyone's lips at the moment, which is the smart campaign planning around clearing in particular, considering the date we're at in the academic year. So Polly's going to take us through that, and then, as Amy said, some questions along the way. So just to give some context to this, so one of the things that we've become ultra aware of, I suppose, not just in recent years, but through the time that we've been working in this sector, is that planning for investment in digital and technology can be a fairly daunting process. And, so this is not to say that this is only isolated to the higher education sector, but particularly in this sector, it can be difficult and has challenges in order to build the case for something like this, a program like this, which can, often be a multi-year program of work. So we know often it's knowing where to start can be probably one of the biggest barriers to get moving. And often a program like this does require a level of support or at least a mandate from the top down to attack it at scale. So hopefully what we'll present today will help anyone who's on this journey along the way, give you some guidance and some pointers. One of the recent surveys that we were looking at by Gartner was suggesting that surveying marketing, technology, IT teams within universities, I guess the general impression that digital is still an underinvested component when it comes to the higher education sector. And I think, when you look at the recent times we've been through, the pandemic and the importance that digital now carries across the sector, it covers a whole wide range of things in terms of the operation, marketing, student experience, admissions and administration. All of those things need and heavily rely now on technology and digital. So it's become more and more important, and right now it's sort of recognized that the budget and the level of investment and focus that digital has in some cases isn't meeting the expectations of both the students and the staffs within the organization. So it's definitely something that isn't I wouldn't say it's a quick fix, but it's being recognized, and hopefully again what we show here will give you a good level of framework to support in the campaigning for investment and funding. One of the biggest challenges that we often encounter early on in a particular program that we're supporting an organization with is probably the core difference between what we would call more of a traditional business, which has more of a top-down management structure where typically a strategy or a directive is set from board level, and that cascades itself down into various operations within the organization that people can act on. I guess the difference in an academic institution is we are typically dealing with more of a decentralized structure. So not just in the way that a directive is set or initiative is set, but also in terms of where digital actually sits and where technology actually sits as a responsibility. It's often spread across marketing, across IT, and across other departments and functions. So building a level of collaboration is really important, and finding ways to, I guess, build a team together that can support a program like this and canvass the opinion and gain the support of the board is really important, but it is a challenge, and we recognize that. And then just some other challenges that are apparent to us. A program like this, if it's a digital transformation program, or it's something that requires investment which will straddle multiple academic years, can be sometimes seen as more risk averse, and there is a tendency in some cases to focus on short-term wins and things that can be delivered in an academic year, in an academic budget cycle. But obviously with a program which encompasses in some cases technology overhaul, platform overhaul from a front-facing perspective, it does need to be considered over multiple years. So it does need a solid case to support it. And then, some of the other challenges we're also aware of is that I guess, digital and technology is not always fully understood at all levels within the organization. So in some cases, you need to focus on things like, what's the return on investment going to look like? What are the objectives and goals that will be met from a program like this? In-house capability and resources, we've worked with a whole range of universities, and some we are working with will have, say, an in-house digital function, and it will either reside inside marketing or IT. In some cases, we have in-house developers and designers and architects and data scientists that are working. But in other cases, we're working with very small teams, and there is much higher dependence on service providers and third parties to support. So that can be quite a varying category, that one. So I think identifying quickly and early on in the process what exists in-house and what needs to be procured through partners is important. I'm sure everybody on this call will be familiar with the legacy technology and infrastructure situation that many of you face. And whilst we as an agency will often get involved at more of the web layer and the app layer, what supports that and what sits in the underlying technology is just as important, because that is often what can prevent the progress from the student experience side or the user experience side. So it's really important that you take all of that into consideration when you're embarking on a program like this. Governance, I think we've been fortunate to work with organizations where there is a steering group or a governing function that's been set up to help drive a program like this. But in other situations, it needs to be formed along the way. And if you're in a position where you can actually put something together that's got a really key exec sponsor, it's got a representation from areas of the business that this will touch, then that is going to put you in a more stronger position to seek approval and gain the traction that you need. And then, one of the challenges is also, part of building a business case is evaluating what funding and investment is required. But it's not just about third-party costs and licensing and technology costs and software. It's also about the cost of running new technology, implementing new technology, change management. So these are some of the things that need to be worked into any investment plan going forward. And I think, something that everyone will be familiar with is when you're working in an academic institution, there is multiple audiences externally and also internally that need to be satisfied and supported through the type of program that we're talking about here. So building, good collaboration practices in from the beginning, making sure people are brought along the journey and the process, but also making sure you've got a very clear view on who you're actually targeting and who you're planning on improving experiences for from the end user. So I guess there's some of the key challenges, and that's what's driven some of the framework that we've put forward today in terms of how we plan to overcome those. So the UNRVLD Framework, this is something that we've developed. It's been developed from the basis of building a business case, but aligned to the higher education sector. So we'll just walk through some of the steps that we've put in place. And the idea of this is it's a framework that should be used collaboratively with your stakeholders and colleagues to help you formulate a plan and put a business plan together that can be taken to whichever level is needed within the institution to gain funding and gain support. So we'll go through each of these steps one by one, but I'll just touch on the 6 steps as they stand. So first part is obviously identifying the problem. Second part is setting the vision. So using this not just as a budgeting exercise, but as something that you can, align everybody around to set a level of ambition and excitement around the program itself. As I talked about, number 3 is benefits, objectives, and return on investment, which go into. And then, probably the most critical one is what is actually in scope for this program, because often there'll be a starting scope and there'll be a phase of exploration and discovery that will happen that will usually expand that scope. So important to, really ring fence what's in consideration here. And then some tips and advice around what you should be considering in terms of forecasting for investment. And then, for us, the really key step is then having a plan for how you intend to deliver and implement such a program.
Okie dokie. So what we wanted to ask at this point is, of these stages of this framework, are you experiencing any challenges around any of these stages right now, if you're going through one of these processes, or are you thinking about setting off on a journey like this, and you might be coming up against these different stages, which areas do you envisage having challenges around? So we've set those up on the pack and see people responding already. Fantastic. There's a good blend of feedback across all of them. The first one to get the most hits was around the investment.
Cool. All right, that's good. Yeah, I mean, that's no surprises there from my side. It's probably the most difficult part, because of what needs to be considered, and also how, it's not easy to forecast a whole series of things that need to be considered when you're requesting funding. So yeah, we've got some suggestions here, and hopefully when we get to that point, we'll ease some of these challenges. All right, okay, let's go through them. So first one is identifying the problem. So with any program like this, one of the first things before we go into any kind of vision setting or objectives and ROI, it's really important to work out what it is you're actually trying to resolve, what it is you're trying to fix through a program like this. So, that can start with a high level view on areas of the organization that will benefit from the investment in new technology or digital infrastructure, but also, identifying where particular frustrations lie today. And these could be a range of things. These could be things from student recruitment numbers right down to productivity within, your staff and your operation with, producing, content or producing material via your web channels. That's the type of thing that needs to be highlighted here. And, a lot of that will mean that you're probably preventing yourselves or your organization from achieving particular ambitions. So things like citing particular strategic initiatives or goals or ambitions that are being set by the university that you are not able to meet is a good starting place at this point. And also, just recognizing pain points within the operation. So these will typically come from talking to people that are interacting daily with technology, that are using tools and systems within the organization, and pulling and canvassing opinion, pulling together a really clear list of what exists today that can be improved from digital investment. So that's a really good starting place. And then from that, the next logical place to start is setting a vision. And the reason we have this step in is because it's very easy in a business case process to get too obsessed with funding and investment and not really set yourselves a clear target or a vision or a place you intend to be in the future. And often this is probably the more exciting part of this process. It's the part where people generally get enthused and excited about where you're heading, and it's a really good way of gaining alignment in the program, because if people can see, okay, this is the future state, this is where we intend to be, and there's some aspirational targets here from this program, that's the type of thing that builds the enthusiasm for the program, and it's important that sets the benchmark, and then everything else resides from that. So things like what is the ultimate aim of the program, and these can be quite audacious goals if they need to be. What's the direction of travel, where are we trying to get to? As I said, should be aspirational and used to align stakeholders. So an important part, and probably the part that is probably the easiest part, to be honest, because it's definitely an aspirational part and doesn't require as much science when you're setting a vision.
Tom, just on the topic there of aligning stakeholders, there's been a couple of comments in the chat. Yep. So David saying that one of their challenges is around that stakeholder buy-in.
Yeah.
And Justin asking regarding this whole framework, how far do we normally go with it? So for example, could we help present it into the board? Have we helped to facilitate the selling to stakeholders? Yeah, for sure. So I think in this scenario, as I said at the beginning, it can be hard for an internal function to kick a program like this off and deliver it at pace, to be able to get to the point where you've got a clear view of a plan that you want to take to, whether it's a steering group or an exec board. So yeah, certainly, and there's been cases where we've supported that program and we've actually,
worked collaboratively with the central team we've worked with, and then we've gone into those situations and helped present the case. And often being a third party can be beneficial because you're not seen as having subjective views or there's no politics. It's more about showing that you've gone in and objectively understood the need from multiple areas of the business and then played those back objectively to the board, and in some cases help prioritize them if needed.
Thank you. Hope that helps for those in the chat. Thank you.
Okay, so the next part is then probably the most critical part. Is how do you set and make sure that you've got a clear set of benefits that you plan to deliver from this investment, and this is particularly important when you're considering, as I said, straddling multiple academic years, and if it is a multi-year program, making sure you've got some clear points along that way where you can prove value and you can prove return. And if possible, these should tie back to strategic targets that have been set by the organisation. I think if you can show, if the organisation has an ambition to do X, Y, and Z, if you can show that your investment plays into that and will have a really clear value that you can attribute to that objective, then that's going to put you in a stronger position to gain support. And some of the things that should be considered here are obviously things like quantifiable targets, metrics. That could be student admission rates. It could be it could be like business service revenue, for example. It's something that we've been supportive of before with other institutions where they're looking to make sure they're gaining revenue advantage from the services that you offer to businesses and the local community. And importantly, trying to map that back to some level of revenue as well. So that's the tangible benefits, but there's also then the intangible benefits, which are things like improved student satisfaction, softer KPIs and metrics that can be used to balance off those harder, more hard-driven KPI ones. And then probably the last one that should also be considered, and often is the forgotten one really with investment in technology, is productivity and efficiency in processes that can be delivered through better automated services, better automated technology. So harder sometimes to quantify in terms of a number, but certainly often is a pain point that's recognized at the beginning. So having a benefit that can be matched back to that is super important. So this was based on the poll. This was also the other one that is recognized as a really clear challenge, and probably because, as I said at the beginning, it's something that expands very quickly in our experience. So if you think about the type of programs that we're generally involved in, let's say the starting scope is about improving web presence, and that can mean multiple things. I'm not just talking about the marketing area of the website. That can be things like student experience. It can be things like student portals, staff portals. That in some cases can be a starting scope, but then very quickly when you get into uncovering what needs to be considered to enable that, very quickly you're into technology conversations. You can go quite deep sometimes into understanding what else is a dependency of those front-facing platforms. And in our experience, these are typically the things that come out in a program like this. So websites, could be apps, student portals, course finders, staff directories, independent faculty websites, in some cases business services and associated departments also having web platforms and products that need to be considered. And then from a technology perspective, that means things like content management systems, marketing automation platforms, CRMs, in some cases customer data platform, the infrastructure that supports that. So all of that stuff can very quickly become part of the scope. So having a view early on of what's in there, making sure you've got the right representation from IT, from marketing, from anyone that can give you a view on if there's particular roadmaps that are already in development or there are particular new software and technology that's underway. Having a view of that early on it will put you in a strong position.
Can I just dive in with a question?
Yep.
Okay, so from Andrew. Thanks, Andrew. So given the broken journey for applicants via UCAS, I think by that you mean that the application process is out of your hands because it's all done on UCAS. You don't own that journey. Andrew would like to know more about how we define ROI with that in mind, because often it's part of a bigger picture. The application process, of trying to bring that back to a particular deliverable is tricky.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, I think that's always going to be a challenge, closing the loop, I guess we call it, in terms of, you know, most marketing functions will be targeted on how much inquiry volume that we can bring through to the own destinations, or we can bring through to, you know, other services that we're providing and contact. But we know there is a handoff, certainly from the undergrad market, there's a handoff to UCAS, and it's kind of a dark funnel at that point, really. So I think having a view of certainly recent, you know, looking back and getting a benchmark for current performance. So if you can see this is the lead volume that was driven, this is the ROI that was driven from that in terms of student applicants and fees, having a benchmark is a good place to start, and then forecasting an uplift off of that benchmark. And, you know, there is no exact science to this. It is a case of planning and forecasting, like any business that plans against investment. But yes, certainly looking back at the data that exists and drawing insights from that would be the place to start.
Thank you. Hope that answers your question, Andrew. Can I jump onto another one that we've got in the chat?
Yep.
Let me do this one. So currently on an open source platform, so this is mainly about the technology platform side, wanted to look at something more sophisticated. How do we go about selecting a technology platform and setting a realistic budget? So sort of two questions in one there.
Yeah, I'd say it probably ties into the scope and the investment forecast. I suppose when we talk about open source, really we're talking about the technology that's powering the web presence or the web experience. So typically what happens when you're going through this process, you'll start to capture requirements very quickly. People will generally talk about, this is our intention, this is what we intend to do with you know, our web experience or our product that we're putting out into market. This is what we hope it will do. And often they can be quite sophisticated requirements that people are asking for. And part of the process here is to then look at what exists today and look at that gap analysis and say, well, currently what you've got as a tool set and a technology isn't able to meet that demand. So that really sets the tone for where you might start to look at the market to say, right, we need probably to upgrade to more enterprise technology, for example. That, you know, that's typically the recommendations we're making as a partner to some of these platforms, is that I guess we know the potential and we know things like the marketing services, the personalized experience that are often asked for in these processes. We will then look and make a recommendation in that process to say, you probably need to be looking at a technology stack like this. Here are some shortlists, here are some options. And, you know, in most cases at that point, we would then invite those partners to come in and present to the stakeholders within the university, because there's only so far we can go with supporting or advocating a particular product before, you know, the vendors themselves need to come and make that case. So that can be a worthwhile exercise for a program like this.
And just last one on that as well, Tom, on the subject of technology platforms and picking the right vendor, Jessica's asking about composable. Is there a composable route that we can look at? Yeah, I think if that's the previous slide I showed where you had all of the different platforms and products that are often under consideration. I think the modern way to get these platforms talking to each other is by having a very simple, or sounds simple, but having a data layer that exchanges information between them. So it's what's known as a more composed architecture. And it means really at that point, it might not be wholesale change that's required across all of the technology stack. It might be that there is 2 or 3 products that need to be improved that actually, if they're talking to each other, will give that benefit back. So these are the types of things that, yeah, as you get into those deeper technical explorations, can be put on the table early on as potential options. And I think, you know, an exercise like this isn't about coming up with a final technology roadmap, but it's certainly a case of saying, here's the potential routes we can go down, and giving a view of, you know, potential investment that's needed to deliver that and timescales. Okay. So we're going to need some coins. I think we all recognise that in this process, and
you know, as I said at the beginning, it's not just a case, back to that question there, Amy, around trying to understand particular license fees or software costs. It's also trying to work out what are the intangible costs that need to be considered in this process as well. And these are the types of things that are slightly harder to forecast and estimate. And I would say no one ever gets this completely right, and that's okay. But certainly showing that you've thought about these things will put you in a stronger position, because often it can be a case of, if you look at a particular development roadmap, or you've got a clear view of the technology cost that needs to be considered, mapping those against internal resources, having some quantifiable cost that you can associate to operation that you can then use to map over the top of that. Because in some cases you want to be showing the benefits and the efficiency and productivity that you can gain, but there is an acceptance to get to that point. You have to have a good amount of time, and time costs money, right? So having time allocated to things like training, the rollout program of new technology and systems, and then also any operational change that you need to make inside the organization, that all of these things can be factored in to an investment forecast. And there's various tools and spreadsheets and mechanics to be able to do this, which at the right time we could share, but it's certainly something that needs to be considered holistically rather than just as a third party cost. And I think that what links all of this to a delivery roadmap is having the ability to show that you've considered how a program like this could be implemented. And look, there's great tools out there. This is an online tool that we will often use called RoadMonk, and it basically allows you to plot your program at a high level and make the case for when it should start and when you expect to see value being delivered across that journey. And that this is simple things like setting yourself clear milestones along the way. I think it's often a good tool to show where you intend to have regular steering group catch-ups or steering group presentations along that journey, and also allows you to map things like quick wins versus longer term initiatives, because often what happens when you're talking to stakeholders within the organization is there'll be things that they just want to get done, and they want to get done quickly, and they're not willing to wait 6, 12, 18 months to see implemented. So having a plan of how you plan to solve some of those nearer term issues, but then also, using this to identify where there's particular dependencies along the way. And that they will have come out through the consultations you would have held with the stakeholders. There may be new technology being implemented. There could be a particular change in the organization that you need to map into this. So it just shows that you're able to link the theory into something that's more practical for the delivery side. And then lastly, this is where you consider things like agile delivery, so something that's more cyclical, something that has iterative releases of change, and maybe has an experimentation layer mapped into it as well. So there may be things that you want to prove that with smaller test cases and experiments along the way before you go into more larger scale implementation. So a good practice and something that will show that you've considered how you plan to get to your vision that you've set early on in the process. So that's the framework. Hopefully there's a good level of base information there that can help you on a program like this. I think just to kind of close this out, the last 3 points we want to make really, that in some cases there will be a mandate that already exists to kickstart a program like this, but in other cases there won't be, and you need to make the case for the business case. So I think achieving some level of commitment for it is definitely going to give you some benefit early on if you can identify something, just a catalyst that enables you to have that conversation with the right people in the organization to get support for even just developing a business case like this. Look for that catalyst. Could be dissatisfaction with something, it could be a poor experience that's being delivered somewhere. Identify it and then use that as a way of building support for it. I think second part is something like this will not move within a decentralized structure without that central commitment, that steering group that can be created with representation from the right areas of the business, build consensus, build support, and then you've got the right backing and support around you that's needed to get something like this initiated. And, you know, obviously from our perspective as a partner that works in this space, you know, we've seen these types of programs start and fail quickly when they haven't had the support from a third party, to be honest, that comes in and can actually drive the program through, can lead it, can, you know, enable you guys to do what you do in your day jobs, but, you know, enable us to come in and help create that program and run it with you alongside you and help you get to where you need to get to. So we're always open for any introduction that's needed at that point from our side.
Thanks, Tom. Can I throw in another question at this point? A couple, actually. One from Stephanie. Thanks, Stephanie. Asking, with many projects, regardless of how organised you are and how well you plan, deadlines can still be pushed. How would you suggest dealing with situations like that?
Yeah, you know, I think early on in a program like this, this is the sort of thing that can get deprioritized quickly if there's other shorter term initiatives. So let's take right now, you know, we know that many functions, many marketing functions right now will be focused on the upcoming months, which we're about to talk about. And we know that the pressure will be on for recruitment, for clearing. So it's the type of thing that needs to be planned at the right time in the year. And it does need commitment. And I guess that's why I'm saying that it's often, if you have support, if you have a third party that can help you in that process, you know, they will deliver it. They'll be, you know, on a particular time frame that they've committed to against a project plan. And it's really just a case then of making sure that you give it the time. So the university gives it the time in terms of the consultations and stakeholders that are needed to have the input, but then push the responsibility to deliver something like this onto a third party. That's certainly the answer from the business case perspective. But I think without having a level of consensus and support for a program like this from the exec committee or the board, it's difficult to make progress, and it will get deprioritized, hence the need for the business case to be approved.
Thanks, Tom. And just another quick one. Oh, Stephanie says, thank you. Another one, would we collaborate with other agencies that are already working with higher ed clients?
Yeah, I think it's a very familiar, from our perspective, a very familiar situation where, you know, often there'll be existing marketing partners, brand partners, technology partners, and I guess, you know, an agency of our size and scale will have different types of services that we're providing. So we would always, look for collaboration. And, you know, there's often a lot of good knowledge and insight that exists with those partners that have been working with you know, institutions and universities for a long time. So, yeah, I think it's part of any agency relationship should always be collaboration, whether it's internally and externally.